Ladies and gentlemen, everyone you love will die. Everything you build will crumble. Everything you say will be forgotten. Everything you do will come to nothing. You and your identity will die and vanish. Your life is meaningless unless the resurrection is true. The resurrection was on Charlie's heart. He contacted me almost 6 years ago because he knew I had been on college campuses presenting evidence for Christianity and answering questions, and he wanted to get better at answering questions related to Christianity. So he asked me to mentor him. It can be difficult to mentor somebody smarter than you, but the only thing that exceeded Charlie's intellect was his humility. Unlike me, because I just wrote a book, 10 Steps to Humility and How I Made It in 7. Which is very humble of me because I actually made it in 6. So this past summer, I came to Phoenix on 4 occasions so Charlie and I could refine our answers to these difficult questions. We'd have these in-office sessions, and then at night, Charlie would say, "Hey, Frank, after I put Gigi and Mac to bed, let's go for a walk." So we would walk through the streets of Phoenix with a 300-pound bodyguard behind us, and we would talk about all these issues. And 2 nights before the murder, Monday, September 8th, we're walking through Phoenix, and Charlie wanted to hear more about the evidence for the resurrection. And I pointed out there's only 2 facts you need to establish to show that Christianity is true. Number 1, God exists. And number 2, Jesus rose from the dead. If those 2 facts are true, ladies and gentlemen, you can show the Bible's the Word of God and Christianity is indeed true. Now, with regard to the first fact, even atheists now are admitting that the universe exploded into being out of nothing. Once there was nothing, and then the whole space-time continuum came into existence. And if space-time and matter had a beginning, whatever created space-time and matter has to be outside of space-time and matter. In other words, the cause must be spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, personal, and intelligent in order to make a choice to create the universe out of nothing. So if Genesis 1:1 is true, and even atheists are admitting the evidence for Genesis 1:1, then every other verse in the Bible is at least possible. Resurrections are possible. So what is the evidence the resurrection took place? I can't trust these Christian sources that you find in the Bible, that you find in the New Testament. Newsflash, ladies and gentlemen, none of the sources in the New Testament are Christian sources. They're all Jewish sources. Oh yes, these men became Christians, but they all started as Jews. Why would they invent a resurrected Jesus, a brand new religion that got them kicked out of the synagogue and then beaten, tortured, and killed if it wasn't true? They wouldn't. In fact, if you want to know what happened, I need to ask you a question. Only a few people in this room will be able to answer this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. If you can remember where you were and what you were doing November 22nd, 1963, hold your hand up and hold it up high. Ladies and gentlemen, see these people with their hands up? These people are very old. November 22nd, 1963 is when President Kennedy was assassinated. It's my earliest memory. I was 2 years old in 2 days, and I remember my mother crying on an ottoman in front of a black and white TV in our home in Wanamassas, New Jersey. It's my earliest memory. I don't remember anything before that and very little after that. It was what we call an impact event. Where were you when the Challenger exploded? Where were you when the second plane hit the tower? Where were you a year and a half ago when President Trump was shot? Where were you on September 10th of this year when you heard the news that Charlie had been shot? I was 25 feet to his right, off his right elbow. And I heard the sound, and I saw him go down. And when we got him in the car, his eyes were fixed. He wasn't looking at me, he was looking right past me into eternity. But we did what we could to administer first aid. And we got him to the emergency room. It seemed like they weren't ready for us, but within a couple of minutes, they started to attend to him and they got a heartbeat. They got a pulse. And the doctor later told us, because Charlie was healthy and young, they could get a pulse even though he had already expired. And then it was about 20 minutes later, after they went into surgery, the doctor came out, and with the subtlety of a brick, he said he's dead. He didn't say, "I'm sorry, we tried everything." He just said he's dead. And what we had feared had come true. But if Christianity is true, and it is, ladies and gentlemen, people don't die, they just change location. The minute Charlie was hit with that weapon, the doctor told us he didn't feel a thing. He was gone. He was absent from the body, present with the Lord. And by the way, this isn't just in the Bible. Do you know that there's been many near-death experiences where people have remote viewing, where their body or their soul leaves their body and they witness things going on that they couldn't see if they were on the table? There's over 300 of these. They're called veridical near-death experiences. And then when the doctors revive the person, they say, "Hey, I just saw an accident on 3rd and Main." And the doctors go, "How could you see an accident on 3rd and Main? You were on the table the whole time." Then they check it out. Yeah, there was an accident on 3rd and Main between a white Honda and a blue Cherokee. How did this guy know this? Because he was separated from his body. And then there's even now death visions. There's many more occasions of death visions. They go into hospices and they ask hospice people, if you start seeing your relatives coming for you, would you tell us? If you see angels coming for you, would you tell us? They did this in a New York hospice. 88% of the people that died told them that they saw their relatives coming for them just before they died. And in fact, it's always deceased people. In fact, one lady, her name was Doris, was in hospice, and she starts to die, and she says, "There's Mom, there's Dad. What's Vida doing there?" Vida was her sister who had died 2 weeks earlier, but she didn't know it. They didn't tell her that her sister had died because they didn't want to kill her with the bad news. How could she see Vida unless Vida had passed on, and she didn't know Vida had passed on? People have a soul, and when you die, your soul's going to go to one of two places. The only question is, where are you going to go? I submit to you, given the evidence we have now just from the Bible, but from science, Charlie saw us attending to him. He saw Erica collapse in the parking lot. Because, ladies and gentlemen, you're not just a molecular machine. You're not just a moist robot. You're a mind and a soul.